Let us try to answer, or let us try to prepare an adjusting entry for XYZ company. So I have here the unadjusted trial balance for XYZ company. And dito sa baba, meron tayo nung adjustments. So for the first one, expired portion of insurance was 10,000. If you can still remember, in adjusting entry, we have actually 6 types. We have the accrued income, accrued expense, unearned income, prepaid expense, depreciation, and impairment loss. For number 1, this is about prepaid expenses. With regards to prepaid expense, meron tayong dalawang method na ginagamit whenever we prepare adjusting entry for prepaid expense. We use asset method or expense method. Para malaman natin whether we have to use asset or expense method, punta tayo kay unadjusted trial balance. Tapos, sa adjustment natin, ang hinahanap natin is for insurance. So, for insurance, hanapin natin kung may asset account ng insurance. Go to your unadjusted trial balance, look for an asset account of insurance. So we have here prepaid insurance. Prepaid insurance is an asset account. Since meron tayong asset na insurance, it indicates that the method that we are going to use in preparing the prepaid expense for transaction number 1 is asset method. Even though kahit makakita ka pa ng expense account ng insurance sa baba, as long as may asset na insurance, ang gagamitin mo, asset method. Priority natin gamitin asset method because if you define prepaid expense is an asset account. It is a current asset account. So our priority to use is asset method. So meron kang recorded prepaid insurance of 36,000 on your unadjusted trial balance. And then, according to the expired. So, since na-expired na yung 10,000 ng insurance mo na 36,000, ibig sabihin, hindi na siya 36,000. Nabawasan siya ng 10,000. Prepaid insurance is an asset account. Every time asset decreases, it is written on the credit side. So, pag naggawa tayo ng adjusting entry dyan, entry on the credit side, we have prepaid expense. Prepaid expense of 10,000. Kasi ang sabi sa adjusting entry natin, that 10,000 is already expired. Ibig sabihin, gamit na yan. So, mababawas na yan sa value ng ating prepaid expense. And to decrease an asset account, prepaid, it should be prepaid insurance. Yung prepaid expense natin na insurance, nabawasan na siya ng 10,000 kasi daw it is already expired. If it is already expired, meaning it is already consumed, it is already used, it is already incurred. Kung gamit na ang insurance mo, consumed na, incurred na, it is already considered as an expense. Ano yung ginamit mo? Insurance. So, yung entry natin on the debit side is insurance expense. Bakit nasa debit si insurance expense? Kasi po, expenses increases on the debit side. And since nagamit mo ang insurance mo, nadagdagan ang expenses mo, nadagdagan ang consumption mo, you have to put it on the debit side for the amount of 10,000. This is to recognize that you already have a consumption of insurance, may expired insurance ka na 10,000, and to recognize that the one recorded on your unadjusted trial balance of prepaid insurance amounting to 36,000 is overstated. It should only be 26,000 kasi yung 10,000 is already expired. Next is unpaid bill to Meralco amounted to 4,567. Meron ka daw unpaid bill sa Meralco. Ang indication nito, kung meron kang unpaid bill sa Meralco, malamang sa malamang, meron kang consumption of electricity. And consumption of electricity and water is under our utilities expenses. Since nagkaroon ka ng consumption, nagkaroon ka ng expenses, nag-increase yan, every time expense increases, it is written on the debit side. So, ang lalagay mo dyan, debit, utilities, expense. To recognize your consumption of electricity. Magkano yun? 4,567. And then, anong sabi? It is still unpaid. So, itong number 2, ang pinag-uusapan natin dito is accrued expense. Kasi meron ka daw expenses pero hindi ka pa nakakapagbayad. If you define accrued expense is a current liability representing an expense already incurred but not yet paid. So, meron kang unpaid bill sa Meralco, meron kang tinatawag na accrued expense, or other term is payable. Ano daw yung dapat mong bayaran? Yung utilities. So, ang entry mo dyan ay credit utilities payable or credit accrued utilities expense for the amount of 4,567. For the next transaction is total supplies used cost 17,241. Ang total used supplies mo daw at the end of the year is 17,241. Ito ang pinag-uusapan natin ulit dito, prepaid expense. Ngayon, sa prepaid expense, meron tayong dalawang method, asset method or expense method. Para malaman kung asset method or expense method yung gagamitin natin, punta ka ulit sa unadjusted trial balance mo. Ang pinag-uusapan natin dito, supplies. So, hanapin mo kung may asset ka na supplies. So, ayan, meron kang supplies on hand, asset account of supplies. Ang indication nito, ang gagamitin nating method, asset method. Even though, kung i-check mong mabuti, sa baba may supplies expense. Kahit may supplies expense dyan, as long as may asset na supplies, ang priority natin to use is asset method. Kasi again, if we define prepaid expense is a current asset account. So, ang sabi sa adjustments natin, your supplies used should be 17,241. Ang actual amount of used supplies mo daw or supplies expense mo is 17,241. The one that is recorded here on your unadjusted trial balance is only 12,080. Gawa tayo ng P account. Meron kang supplies expense, On the debit side, nung unadjusted trial balance mo, may recorded ka na 12,080. And then, at the end of the year, your adjusted amount of supplies expense should be 17,241. So, for it to become 17,241, kailangan mong nagdagan kasi the one that is recorded as 12,080 is understated. Kulang yan. Kapag ka-understated, kulang, kailangan natin dagdagan. Magkano ang dapat natin idagdag para maging 17,241 siya? We need 5,161. So, meron ka ulit entry na debit supplies expense 5,161. Ilalagay natin yan. Supplies expense on the debit side for 5,161. And then, ang credit natin is using the asset method, ang credit natin ay supplies on hand. We have a credit of supplies on hand to recognize that the one recorded on your unadjusted trial balance of supplies on hand is overstated. Sobra siya. Overstated siya. So, kung sobra, kailangan natin bawasan. Since supplies on hand is an asset account, for it to decrease, kailangan natin ilagay yan sa credit side. Now, this is our entry for transaction number 3. For the next adjustments, number 4, an estimated 1/2 of 10% of accounts receivable was deemed to be uncollectible. So 1/2 of 10% is 5%. So 5% of your accounts receivable is deemed to be uncollectible. Let us go back to our unadjusted trial balance. Look for the value of accounts receivable. That is 65,900. So 65,900 times 5%. The answer is How much is 65,900 times 5%? That is 3,295. That is 3,295. Looking at your unadjusted trial balance, you have a record of allowance for impairment loss amounting to 324. Gawa ulit tayo ng P account, allowance for impairment loss, debit, credit. Meron kang recorded on your unadjusted trial balance credit of 324. But according to the adjustments, it should be 3,295. Meaning, 324 is understated. Again, kulang. So, kapag kulang, kailangan natin dagdagan. Ilan ang kailangan natin idagdag para siya ay maging 3,295? Kailangan natin ng 3,295, kailangan natin ng 2,971. Credit side again kasi allowance for impairment loss is a contra asset account. Since it is a contra asset account, it increases on the credit side, contra of your asset. So, ang entry natin dyan, credit allowance for impairment loss. How much? 2,971. And then, 2,971. Yan. If your allowance for impairment loss is understated, ang indication neto, your impairment loss is understated as well. So if it is understated and it is an expense account, for it to increase, we have to put it on the debit side. Impairment loss. Debit side, 2,971. Next transaction. For the fifth one, what happened was, it says here, maturity of the note is on January 15. Maturity of the note is on January 15. The only problem here is that hindi stated kung ano yung note. Whether notes receivable ba, tayo ba nagpautang, or notes payable, tayo ba nangutang. So, ang gagawin natin, babalik tayo kay unadjusted trial balance. Hanapin natin si note. Wala kang notes receivable, tsaka sa payable, ayan, meron kang notes payable. Ibig sabihin, tayo nangutang dito sa part na to. And, kung maaalala nyo, ang kakambal lagi niyan ay interest. So, since tayo ang nagpautang, tayo ang nangutang, it is a notes payable, tayo ang may utang, meaning, ang interest niyan is an expense on our part. Remember, interest is an additional payment. Kung tayo ang nangutang, tayo ang magbibigay ng additional payment, meaning it is an expense on our part. And notes payable is a 60-day, 6% note. How much is your notes payable? 28,800. Try natin i-compute. 28,800 times the interest of, magkano yung interest? 6%. So, 28,800 times 6%, that is 1,728. This 1,728 is the interest for the note for the whole year. This is good for 1 year. What we are about to record is only the amount of interest that is already incurred. Remember, according to accrual basis of accounting, we have to recognize expense in the period when it is incurred, regardless if it is paid or not. According to the transaction, payment will be made on January 15. Since we're doing the adjusting entry today, meaning today is December 31. Since today is only December 31, meaning we haven't made the payment yet. We are going to make the payment on January 15. And even though we are not yet paid, we have to recognize the expense. Recognize na natin yung expense natin, yung interest expense natin. And the only amount of interest expense that we are going to record is only the amount of expense that is already incurred. So, ilang araw na ba lumipas yung utang mo? Balikan mo ulit yung transaction. Ang sabi kasi dito, this note is a 60-day note, meaning it is payable within 60 days. And then, it is payable on January 15. From today, December 31, up to January 15, meaning meron kang natitirang 15 days para magbayad. Kung ang note ay payable within 60 days, meron kang natitirang 15 days para magbayad, meaning ang lumipas na ng araw ng utang ay 45 days. So, ibig sabihin, ang i-record mo lang na interest is only good for 45 days. So, yung formula mo dyan ay 1,728, which is the interest for 1 year, times 45 days, which is the number of days that the expense is already incurred, divided by 360 days, which is the number of days we have in 1 year, assuming we have 30 days per month. So the answer is 216. The amount of expense that is already incurred for that notes payable of 60 days, 60 days 6% note is 216. So recognize natin yung expense natin, which is interest expense. Nasa debit side siya kasi expense siya. Every time expense increases, it is written on the debit side. Kaya ang interest natin nasa debit side. I-record natin yan, that is 216. And then, since the payment will be made on January 15, meaning it is not yet paid. So, yung transaction natin for number 5 is another example of accrued expense, wherein you have an incurred expense, however, the payment is not yet made. Since hindi pa rin yan bayad, meron ka ulit accrued expense. Ano ba yung kailangan mong bayaran? Yung interest. So, ang entry mo on the credit side is accrued interest expense for the amount of 216. Next transaction, number 6. The recorded rent income of 378,980 included an advance payment by one of the lessees amounting to 12,000. This number 6 problem is about unearned income. If you can still remember, in unearned income, whenever we prepare it, we have two methods, the income method and liability method. So in preparing unearned income using liability method, para malaman mo kung liability method ang gagamitin mo, punta ka sa unadjusted trial balance. Hanapin mo kung may unearned income. Kapag walang unearned income, malamang sa malamang may income. Ayan, may income. So, ang gagamitin mo dito, income method. Kapag parehong present, may unearned income, tapos may income, priority to use is liability method. Kasi, pag dinefine mo unearned income is a liability account. So, since walang unearned income dito at may income, ang gagamitin nating method, income method. Ang sabi dun sa problem, so nirecord mo daw na amount ng rent income na 378,980, yung 12,000 daw doon, advance payment. Ibig sabihin, the one that you recorded on your unadjusted trial balance as rent income of 378,980, this is overstated, sobra. So, kung sobra ang rent income mo, kailangan natin bawasan. Since it is an income account, for an income to decrease, we have to put it on the debit side. Ilagay natin sa debit side. So, meron kang entry, debit, rent, income. Magkano ba yung sobra? 12,000. So, we have to put rent income on the debit side, and then our credit will be the advance payment of 12,000. If it is an advance payment, meaning that advance payment is not yet earned. It is still unearned. Unearned income is a liability account. Every time liability increases, it is written on the credit side. So we have to put the credit unearned rent income. The amount of unearned income is 12,000. We have a record of debit rent income to recognize an overstatement of your recorded rent income on your unadjusted trial balance, and a credit of unearned rent income to recognize that the 12,000 recorded as your rent income is an advance payment, meaning it is not yet earned, it is still an unearned income. What type of income? Rent. So you have unearned rent income. And last adjustments is for the depreciation. So meron tayong kailangan i-compute na depreciation for the building, furnitures and fixtures, and machineries and equipment. So to compute their depreciation, the formula for depreciation is cost less salvage value divided by its useful life. So magkano yung cost nila? Punta ka kay unadjusted trial balance for the building. Its cost is 1,600,000 less its salvage value. Magkano ang salvage value niyan? 166,600 divided by its useful life of 50 years. So the answer is, or the depreciation per building is 16,680. For the furnitures and fixtures, how much is your furnitures and fixtures? Its cost is 765,700 less its salvage value of 125,000 divided by its useful life of 40 years, which is 16,017 pesos and 50 centavos. For machineries and equipment, its cost is 143,000 less its salvage value of 33,000 divided by its useful life of 20 years. So its depreciation is 5,500. So ito yung depreciation nila. Copy natin para di natin kalimutan. So for the building, its depreciation is 16,680. For the furnitures and fixtures, 16,017 and 50 centavos. For machineries and equipment, that is 5,500. So if you can still remember, every time that you prepare an adjusting entry for depreciation, ang entry iisa lang. It is always debit, depreciation, expense, and then credit, accumulated, depreciation. Now, with regards to depreciation, hindi mo kasi yan pwedeng pagsamasamahin. So, kailangan nakahiwalay siya. Kailangan nakahiwalay ang depreciation mo. Hindi mo pwedeng pagsamahin ang depreciation ng building saka ng furnitures and machineries and equipment. So, ang gagawin mo, paghihiwalay-hiwalayin mo sila. Bali, magiging 3 ang entry mo for depreciation. Tapos, to indicate kung para saan ang depreciation, lagyan mo na lang ng dash yung entry mo. Depreciation expense, dash, building. Accumulated depreciation, dash, building. To symbolize that that depreciation is for the building. Tapos, magkano yan? That is for 16,680. For accumulated depreciation, 16,680. For the furnitures and fixtures, ilalagay mo rin, lagyan mo lang ng dash para hindi ka malito. At least at the end of the year, when you prepare the financial statement, when you compute for the book value, accurate yung magiging sagot. Saka hindi ka na malilito kasi nakasegregate or nakaseparate yung depreciation mo for each fixed assets. So, ang depreciation mo for furnitures and fixtures ay 16,017 and 50 centavos. For the machineries and equipment, ganun din, ilagay mo para hindi ka malito. And then yung value niya, which is 5,500. Ayan na siya. Kung nag-compute ka at the end of the year, ng book value ng bawat fixed assets mo, hindi ka na malilito. Ito na lang yung entries mo. And this is your adjusting entry preparation for XYZ company.